Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I have come up with the second video on the topics covering on circulatory system and the structure of the heart. Last topic was on blood. If you have not seen the earlier part, please look for description for link. Before we move to the details on topics covered in this video, please subscribe to my channel and provide the feedback in the comments. What are the things we are going to cover in this video? We are going to cover about the structure of the heart, the types of vessels which are present in our body. We'll talk about two types of circulatory system, namely closed and open circulatory system. We will study the pathway, how the blood will flow through the various parts of our body, that is the circulatory system, and we will study about the phases of the cardiac cycle. These are the things which I am going to cover in this video. Let's talk about the structure of the heart. So, the heart is an organ which pumps the blood to the various parts of our body. The oxygenated blood which circulates to all the parts of the body is mainly due to the heart. When we talk about the heart is made up of four chambers, namely right auricle, left auricle, right ventricle and left ventricle. And very important, you may think, where is the heart situated? The heart is situated in the middle of the thoracic cavity and it is slightly tilted towards the left. So when we compare the right artery auricle and the left auricle, right atria or the right auricle is little bit larger when compared to the left auricle. And when we talk about the heart is made up of four chambers, which I've already said you. And between these chambers, for example, when we talk about the right auricle and the left ventricle, there is one valve which we will call it as a tricuspid valve. Same thing, when we talk about the left auricle and the left ventricle, there is another one valve which we will call it as a bicuspid valve. These two valves are very, very important because it prevents the blood from flowing back. So when it prevents the blood from flowing back means what? It is protecting the heart from the mixing of the blood. You know that one way the oxygenated blood gets circulated in the body, in the meanwhile the deoxygenated blood will be collected. So we should keep in mind, but these two, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, should not mix. So this is taken care by a tricuspid valve and a bicuspid valve. And the next thing what you have to understand in the structure of the heart is that there are mainly pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein which are present. Always remember that arteries are the one which carries the oxygenated blood, but only in the pulmonary artery the artery will carry the deoxygenated blood, which is very, very important, and the question may arise with this. And always vein will carry the deoxygenated blood except the pulmonary vein which carries the oxygenated blood. So these two are very, very important. Mark this and note this. These two may be a favorite for the examiners. So always remember, arteries will carry the oxygenated blood, but only the pulmonary artery will carry a deoxygenated blood. And comes to a vein always carries the deoxygenated blood except the pulmonary vein which carries the oxygenated blood. So when we talk about the heart is made up of two membranes. One, that means the heart, it is surrounded by the two membrane, which we will call it as an outer membrane and the inner membrane. Remember, when we are talking about the heart is always connected with the one name which we will call it as cardiac. So when we talk about anything about cardiac, it means that we are talking about the heart. So cardiac will always go with heart. So the heart, what we are talking, is made up of two membrane or two layer, which we'll call it as an outer layer and the inner layer generally, but when we talk about the biological terms, we'll call it as the outer membrane and the inner membrane. These two membranes will mainly help the heart from any type of injury or the shock. That means any type of injury or shock or anything which is going wrong with the heart is little bit controlled by these two membranes. And between these two membranes there is a fluid which we'll call it as a pericardial fluid. This pericardial fluid is very important because this is the fluid which prevents the heart from any type of friction or injury. So the heart which pumps the blood is made up of two types. That means in the heart, whatever the blood is circulating, that is made up of two types. One is oxygenated blood and another one will be the deoxygenated blood. But we will discuss about all these things, how the oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood will be circulated in the later slides. Let's talk about the vessels which are present in the circulatory system. When we talk about the vessels, there are mainly three types which you have to remember. First one is the arteries which carry oxygenated blood. Earlier also I said this, that arteries will carry always the oxygenated blood except the pulmonary artery. Remember that. Second one is the veins which always carry the deoxygenated blood. Remember, pulmonary vein is the only one which carries the oxygenated blood. Next we will talk about the capillaries, the flow of blood to all the parts of the body. That means the distribution of the blood. The arteries are the main branches through which the blood is taken from the heart, but it will be circulated to all the parts of the body with the help of the fine tube-like structures which we will call it as capillaries. So let's start with the two types of systems which are present. There are two types of system through which the fluid will pass. That is the closed type of system and the open type of system. We will see the difference between the open circulatory system and the closed circulatory system. So in an open circulatory system, the blood is not restricted to the blood vessels. That means what? If you take an example of the cockroach in this case, the blood, what is there? It is not restricted within the blood vessel. That means the blood vessel itself is absent in the cockroach and other organisms like arthropods. Whereas closed circulatory system, the blood will flow in a definite blood vessels. That means the blood is having a particular route in which it has to go. Next one, in open circulatory system, it will be in direct contact with the tissue. In open circulatory system, it will be in contact with the tissue. Whereas in closed system, it will not be in contact with the tissue. In open circulatory system, the exchange of material takes place, but whereas in closed circulatory system, along with the nutrients, the waste materials are also exchanged between the blood and the tissue. And in open circulatory system, it won't support the exchange of gases. There is no exchange of gases taking place. But in closed circulatory system, there is a support for the exchange of gas. So only, for example, if we take human heart, there is an exchange of gas wherein oxygen is given and carbon dioxide is taken back. And in open circulatory system, you can see that it is white in color, because there is no pigments which are present in the open circulatory system. The pigments are absent. So when you take the blood of the cockroach, you can see it is white in color. Whereas hemoglobin is present in the closed circulatory system, which is red in color. Hence, these are the important differences which you have to know. They may ask for the 2 marks question, tell me the differences between the closed circulatory system and the open circulatory system. Remember all these points. These are very, very important to understand the 2 types of system which are present in an organism. See, with this diagram, I am going to explain you about the circulatory system. You can see here the diagram. Here I am explaining you how the blood is circulated from the heart or into the heart from all the parts of the body, and how it is taken to the lungs for purification, and how the oxygenated blood is again taken back into the heart. See, here is the heart. This is the structure of the heart. Remember, here what is there? It is called inferior vena cava. What is here is called as superior vena cava. The superior vena cava will collect the deoxygenated blood from the anterior parts. That means the topmost part of the body. It will mainly take the deoxygenated blood from the anterior part of the body, and inferior vena cava will take the blood from the, that is the deoxygenated blood from the posterior parts of the body, that is from the lower half of the body. So inferior vena cava will take the blood from the lower half of the body, whereas superior vena cava will take the blood from the topmost part of the body, and this will be sent to the right auricle. This right auricle will have the deoxygenated blood. These two are called as tricuspid valve. That means here you can see the opening. The opening is with the help of the tricuspid valve, which is actually made up of 3 flap-like structures. Okay. Due to the closing of this, there is one structure called as tricuspid valve here, which I have not shown at the present diagram. But with this valve, what will happen? The deoxygenated blood, which is there in right auricle, enters into the ventricles. It will enter into the right ventricle. In the right ventricle, what will happen? The right ventricle will have the deoxygenated blood, and this is sent to the lungs. This is sent to the lungs with the help of the pulmonary artery. With the help of the pulmonary artery, the deoxygenated blood is sent to the lungs. In the lungs, what will happen? The purification or the exchange of gases will take place. The exchange of gases will take place. The deoxygenated blood is exchanged with the oxygenated blood, and that will be taken back from the lungs to the heart by the pulmonary vein. These two are the pulmonary vein. Here 2 are present, here 2 are present. These are the veins that is called as pulmonary vein, which will carry the oxygenated blood to the left side of the heart. So left side of the heart mainly pumps the oxygenated blood. So it will come to the left auricle. So pulmonary vein will carry the oxygenated blood to the left auricle. From the left auricle, it is taken to the left ventricle, again with the help of the bicuspid valve. So with the help of the bicuspid valve, what will happen? The oxygenated blood is sent into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, the oxygenated blood flows into the aorta. The main branch which carries the blood is the aorta. The oxygenated blood is carried with the help of the aorta. This aorta will supply the blood to the arteries. Then that arteries will branch out into capillaries and send the blood to all the parts of the body. This is what is seen in the circulatory pathway. What will happen? The left ventricle will pump the blood into an aorta. The aorta are the one which carries the oxygenated blood and gives it to the arteries. From the arteries, it is distributed to the capillaries, and capillaries are the one which will transport the blood to all the parts of the body. Hence you have to remember This whole thing will happen in a few fraction of seconds, and if this heart, even if it stops for a minute or for a second, then life will be of miserable one. Hence it is very very important and very very interesting to know about our own heart. So are you understanding how the blood is circulated to all the parts of the body with the help of these four chambers which are present in the heart, with the help of the other accessory parts which are present in the heart? I have said about the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve. It is very very important to know something about this bicuspid valve and tricuspid valve. The opening and the closing of the tricuspid valve or bicuspid valve is help of the muscles. The muscles will contract and relax, hence helping the closing of these valves. See, at the bicuspid valve is attached to the walls of the inner membrane of the heart with the help of the muscles which will call it as a papillary muscles. Usually the papillary muscles which will tend to hold the valves open, and when they relax they close it back, hence helping the flow of blood from the right ventricle to left ventricle. So it will mainly help in maintaining the blood flow in the heart. That means with the help of this papillary muscles it can contract and relax, hence helps in opening and closing of the valves and thus protecting the blood from the mixing. Whereas to the right side we can see there is a eustachian valve which prevent the backflow of the blood from the inferior vena cava. See, I have already said inferior vena cava will collect the deoxygenated blood and send it to the right auricle. But while doing this process the blood should not revert black. That is taken care by the eustachian valve. So these are the valves which play a very important role in maintaining the deoxygenated blood and oxygenated blood in the right chambers of the heart. That means the blood is in correct position because of these valves. They are doing their work at the particular time so that it will avoid the mixing of the blood and thus protecting the individual. Okay. Whereas in the ventricles you can see some muscular structures called as columnae carneae which maintain the flow of blood in the right ventricle. As I've said you, in the left ventricle you have papillary muscles which will help in closing and opening of the bicuspid valve. In the same way, in the right ventricle you have a muscles which is called as columnae carneae which will help in when it contracts the tricuspid valve open, when it relaxes it closes, helps in flow of the blood from the right auricle to right ventricle. So these valves, mainly a tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve, will play a very important role in maintaining the blood in the human being or in the circulatory system. So thus it completes the circulatory system, and then we are jumping into the next very very important topic of the heart, which we will call it as a cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle is seen with the various phases, namely two phases are seen in the cardiac cycle. So before going into the phases of cardiac cycle, let's see what is a cardiac cycle. See, the events or the sequence of events that occur repeatedly with every heartbeat is called as a cardiac cycle. That means the regular process of events that occur repeatedly with every heartbeat is called as a cardiac cycle. Mainly the cardiac cycle is divided into two phases, namely systole and diastole. All these things, either it may be a systole or a diastole, are mainly based on the two things. One is contraction and relaxation, and other things will be the blood flowing from the region of the higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. And as I've already said, the contraction and relaxation occur by keeping in mind the pressure gradients. Depending upon the pressure gradients, the contraction and relaxation will takes place, just maintaining the phases of the cardiac cycle. So let's talk about in detail about the phases of cardiac cycle and how the graph will be seen in an ECG, echocardiography. So let's start learning in the cardiac cycle. What are the things we are going to learn in the cardiac cycle? See, as I said earlier, there are two things which you have to remember. One is a diastole and another one is a systole, which is these two things are seen in the heart. So first we will talk about the diastole using the diagram which I am showing on the slide. See, using this diagram, I'll clearly explain you what are the things which are happening in the heart. See, as I've already said you, this is a right auricle, this is an right ventricle. Okay, this is right auricle, this is right ventricle. So this side is the left side of the heart. Okay, but the thing is, what you have to understand here is that, see, there is a pressure which is created inside the right auricle. When the pressure is depolarization, mainly creates an pressure gradient between the right auricle and the right ventricle. Are you understanding the concept clearly? See, this lower part is called as right ventricle and upper portion of the heart is called as right auricle. Okay. See, the opening of this valve, you can see this is arterioventricular valve. This is called as AV valve, the valve which is present between the arteries and the veins. The name itself says it is a arterioventricular valve. What is this arterioventricular valve? See, you can see there is an opening of this valve. There is a pressure gradient which is created between these two. One is auricle and ventricle, these two chambers. What will happen? The pressure will be more in the right auricle when compared to the right ventricle. That means what? The pressure will be more on which side of the heart? Right side of the heart. So what will happen? This pressure difference will create an flow of an blood from the region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. Hence, the AV valve will open and that the blood flows from the region of its higher concentration, that is the right auricle, to the right ventricle through an arterioventricular valve. This is the first part of the cycle, and when this happens, the sound is the first heart beat or heart sound is heard. That is called as first heart sound. This is very important and this contributes to the P wave on the ECG. So when we go through the graph, we can easily see what is an P wave. I will explain you there with the P wave once again. But remember, when the blood is flowing from the right auricle to the right ventricle, this is called as diastole, and we will call this as in first half of the cardiac cycle, and it produces a beat which we'll call it as a first heart sound. See, I have already explained you the systolic and diastolic pressures, but the thing is, before going with the systole, we have to understand the depolarization of the QRS complex, and this will take place by step by step. First one is an isovolumetric contraction. See, when ventricles start to contract, the pressure is created, but valve will get closed. Hence, ejection of the blood won't take place. See, I've said already in the systolic pressure, what will happen? The pressure is difference is created. Before the pressure difference is created, we have to close that valve. That valve closing is done with the help of the ventricles. The ventricles start to contract, holding the valve in its position. This is called as isovolumetric contraction. In rapid ejection phase, the word itself says rapid ejection phase. What is this rapid ejection phase? This is nothing but the one which I have explained you with the earlier one. What is happening here? See, the pressure gradient is created between the ventricles and the artery. Okay, pulmonary artery and the ventricle. So what ejection means? What something is going out. How it will go out? With the help of this pressure gradient. With the help of this pressure gradient, the blood will flow from the region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. So the blood will flow from the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery. Thus, that is called as rapid ejection phase. Ejection means going or moving out of the ventricles. So these are the two phases. These are the two steps which you have to understand when we talk about the systolic cycle or the systolic phase of the cardiac cycle. Next, we have to study about the other part of the cardiac cycle, which we will call it as a systole, which is seen in the ECG, which we'll normally call it as a QRS complex. Here, what will happen in the QRS complex, or what are the things which is going on in the systolic phase is that, see, now the blood is in the right ventricle and it has to go to the lungs for its purification. Is I am correct? Are you understanding? See, you can see clearly in this diagram, here is a right auricle, here it is a right ventricle. So now what is the thing is that it has to go to the lungs for the purification. As I'm clear, so which one is the one which carries this? This is a pulmonary artery, which I have said you before also. This is the only artery which carries the deoxygenated blood. Makes it clear, it is very, very important. Okay, see, now there is again the pressure gradient which is created between the right ventricle and also the right pulmonary artery. Okay, the pressure is again created between these two, that is the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, and the blood will flow from the region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. Because of this gradient, what is seen is the opening of the another valve which is here. Another valve will get opened, which we will call, which are very, very important. That valve which is there will open up and just the blood will flow from the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery. This pressure gradient will create another one phase of the cardiac cycle, which we will call it as a systolic phase. This phase is called as pumping phase. It means what? Here the blood is pumped into the lungs with the help of the pulmonary artery. And the valve which is involved in opening and closing of this is a semi-lunar valve. I am making myself very clear. This is a valve which we will call it as a semi-lunar valve, which will open and close due to the pressure difference between the pulmonary artery and also the right ventricle. When there is a difference in the pressure, automatically the blood will flow from this region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration, directly pumping the blood into the artery. The artery will carry the blood for the lungs for its purification. So this is called as systolic phase, and this produces the second heart sound. Is I myself clear with this? So these two phases are very, very important for the individual. This can be asked in many ways. When you see ECG, you should be very clear what are the things that is happening in the heart. Like any doctor for that matter, they will learn this only with the help of the ECG. How your heart will work will mainly depend upon the ECG. If you are not able to understand the ECG, then it's very difficult to understand the cardiac cycle. So it's very, very important that you concentrate on this, mainly a diastolic pumping and systolic pumping. That means diastole is also a phase of cardiac cycle and systole is also a phase of the cardiac cycle. Remember this, and in the systole only the QRS complex is formed, and this diastole systoles will be alternate in forms, and it will continue throughout your lifetime producing a heart sound. So let's quickly recap what we have studied in this video. Like, we have studied about the structure of the heart, we have studied about the blood vessels, namely arteries, veins and capillaries, and we have also learned about the closed and the open circulatory system and how the blood will flow from and four chambers of the heart, like how the blood is circulated to all the parts of the body. Then lastly, we have studied about the cardiac cycle, which is so interesting and it is so attractive that one should know about the cardiac cycle and the circulatory system, because it is a part of you. Because of this, we are alive. Because of its work, we are alive. So we have to appreciate the God for this, who has created this wonderful nature with this wonderful heart. So let's hope that you understood all the videos regarding the heart. If you have any doubts or anything, you can just drop it on the comment box so that you can get the right answers. Thank you.